Greetings and salutations, dear viewers. I'm Nakatalili, and I'm still a bad monk. Welcome back to the realm of Final Fantasy XIV. Many of you may be wondering where the Dancing with Primals videos have been happening, if I was going to be continuing them. The short of it, to give you a brief update on that, is I simply am doing a lot more things with my time at the moment. I'm spending more time on Will Gaia, for example, which I'm sure many of you who don't pay attention to me on other media don't actually know much about. But given that I don't have nearly as much time to devote to Final Fantasy as I used to have. However, having played through a fair amount of content since the Heavensward patch, I would like to say, though I do not know how much content I will be able to cover, there are a lot of things in it that I think I will be able to. I'm going to be able to tackle Alexander normal mode, and I'm going to be able to tackle the expert dungeons. I do not yet know if I'm going to be able to do the extreme mode primals. I've not yet tackled them. I also don't know if I'm going to have the time to go back to Dancing with Tofu, though I'd like to if I get the time to do it. So now that you know where we are, I'm going to speak very briefly on what I do as a monk and how that's changed since Heavensward. This is mostly to put into perspective a lot of the things that you see me doing while I'm playing in other videos that you may see me do. In Heavensward, you were given, you may notice I've rearranged my bar a little bit. In fact, it was very, very recently that I changed this bar, so I'm still getting used to it and trying to remember where I've moved things to. But there are, for the most part, 5 abilities that Monk got in Heavensward, and that is Meditation, Form Shift, Purification, Tornado Kick, and over here, Elixir Field. Now, of these abilities, real quick what each of them does, you may recall that Monk actually goes between different forms in order to use their abilities. For example, these top 3 abilities here are the only 3 that I can do in my basic combo. After I use one of them, it will put me in a form that lets me use one of these 3. And then after I use one of those, it will put me in a form that lets me use one of these 3. What Form Shift does, it essentially toggles me between those forms without me having to use the abilities. So that puts me into the first form, Oppo form. The second one puts me into Raptor form, so you can see these are lit up now. And finally, it puts me into Coral form, which lets me use those final 3. So that's what Form Shift does. It has a couple uses, but I'll get to those later. Another one is Meditation, which, in using Meditation, you see it gives me a single stack of a buff called Chakra. The Chakra doesn't actually do anything on its own. If I do 2, I have 2 stacks, and this can go up to 5. Now, the big thing that this does, it does 2 things. One, once you have 5 stacks, Meditate changes to the Forbidden Chakra, which is just a very big off-global cooldown attack that does a lot of damage. The other thing it does is give you Purification, which if you're running low on TP, you can use that to get some TP back. Using either of these removes your 5 stacks. Of note, as nice as it is to have this, it does take a global cooldown, so if you use this, that is a chance that you're not going to be using your regular attacks. Effectively, it is pointless to do if you can instead be using one of these. It's intended for if you have a little bit of downtime, if you have to run away from the enemy, if you're waiting for a boss to change forms, or you're between fights, or some such. So that is these 3. The last one is Tornado Kick, which Tornado Kick, One thing that happens as I progress through these forms is once I get to the final one, if I use one of these 3 abilities, it gives me a buff called Greased Lightning. If I go through this again, I'll get a second stack of it, so I'll have, it'll say, have the Greased Lightning thing with a 2. This goes up to 3. Now, as long as Greased Lightning is active, I get a buff to my damage. Chakra, as an example, does nothing while it's active. All it does is it lets me use these 2 abilities. But while Greased Lightning is at its 3rd stack, I have a very big damage buff, so I want to keep that up, so I'm doing more damage. What Tornado Kick does is a lot of damage, but it removes all my Greased Lightning stacks. So with that said, it's very good to use at the end of a fight, if I know I'm not going to be attacking much more after that. And then Elixir Field is just really nice because Monk doesn't have much in the way of AoEs, and Elixir Field is a rather powerful AoE around me. And it's also off global cooldown, it's on a 30-second cooldown, or some such. Global cooldown, as for those of you who don't know, if I hit this ability, it will use a global cooldown, and you see all of these abilities that have the little clock going around them. Those are all abilities that are on global cooldown, and in turn abilities that I can't use one right after the other. So I can't, like, hit this and then immediately hit that one, because you see it's counting down. There's also some abilities that are darkened out, specifically these 6, as well as Tornado Kick and these 2. The darkened out abilities I simply can't use right now. These 3, for example, require me being in the 2nd form, and then you see they light up. I can use them. I do that again. Now these 3 light up. I can use these 3. This one only lights up once you have 3 Greased Lightning stacks, and these 2 are both situational. Mercy Stroke, for example, can only be used once the enemy is below, like, 15% HP, and Haymaker can only be used after I dodge an attack. So with that said, that's a real quick idea of... I explained global cooldown, I explained the new abilities, but there are a number of you who simply don't know how Monk works in general. And that's what I'm here to explain, because this is a lot of buttons, and it may be a bit intimidating to see all of these right up front. But many of these are either extremely situational, or aren't used very often at all. Let's start down here on the bottom. You see these 3, Fists of Fire, Fists of Earth, Fists of Wind. These are things I'm not going to be using in battle, by any stretch of the imagination. Fists of Fire just gives me a buff that will not wear off, that just increases the damage that I do. So if I'm in a party, say, where I just want to be doing more damage, I put that on. Fists of Earth, on the other hand, increases my defense. Again, that one especially, it increases my defense more than Fists of Fire increases my offense. So if I'm in a position where I'm going to be taking damage, such as, say, I'm soloing, or on the off chance I have to be a backup tank, Fists of Earth is the better option. And then Fists of Wind just increases movement speed, so that's nice if I'm, like, running around town or something. So for the most part, that's it. I enter a dungeon, I enter a fight or some such, I trigger that one, and then I just don't have to worry about these 3 anymore at all. Beside that, I have a couple more defensive abilities. Featherfoot increases my evasion, so again, that's good if I'm taking a hit. It's not something I'll ever really do in a dungeon, but nice if you're soloing, especially if you're soloing something very big. Bloodbath is an ability that I got from Marauder, but it actually refills a little bit of my health whenever I deal damage. So again, I shouldn't really need to use it much when I'm in a situation where someone else can heal me, because it's a very minimal heal. But if I'm, say, soloing, kind of nice. Second Wind is just a one-off, this heals me. Again, if I'm in a party, it's not really something I should need to use. Mantra is not something you will ever see me use. It has its uses, but it's not a use that I will probably ever use, because I'm a bad monk. But what Mantra does is it puts an effect on everyone nearby me that increases healing done to them for a brief amount of time. This is good when you know people are going to need to be healed very soon. Like, if everybody just gets hit by something and you know a big heal is going to come, that would be a good time to use it. Personally, I never use it because, as a DPS, my thoughts simply aren't on healing, so it's not something that it occurs to me to use. I tried to get into the habit of working on it, it didn't work. Add to that, I've found that the effect of it is largely minimal, so not the biggest deal in the world. Oh, that would be Ogre and Pettyfan. Hi. How you guys doing? But with that said, that's those. Let's see here, what else do we have? Form Shift is not something I will ever use in battle, but it's something good before battle. For example, if I use it once, I can use like Dragon Kick and get the effect that Dragon Kick has. Or if I use it 3 times, it'll let me hit the first attack as Snap Punch, which will immediately give me a stack of Greased Lightning. That's nice. Forbidden Chakra is just kind of a oh crap button, because I'm not going to be able to get my chakra stacks back up in the middle of battle, since it's simply more efficient to use a regular attack. But it's nice to use early on, so you don't have to, like, just so if you're given the chance to use chakra to get it back up, you can. But overall, it's not something you worry about too much. Invigorate gives me some TP back. All my abilities, everything that I use, gives me TP, or takes TP to use. It refills over time, but especially if I'm really going at it, I can run low, and Invigorate helps that. Let's see here. Down here we have Shoulder Tackle and Steel Peak. Steel Peak is simply a stun. If I see an enemy doing something big and nasty, I can use Steel Peak to make sure they stop doing something big and nasty. This is, again, something I'll generally not use much at all. It's very situational. And usually there's someone who's better at stunning than Monk who will be doing the stunning. Shoulder Tackle is a distance closer. I can use it on something and I zip over to it. Not really something that I will use when I'm in the midst of combat, but if I notice, hey, I'm a distance away, I can use that. Howling Fist and Elixir Field are both on a much longer cooldown. I can use them in order to just do a little bit of AoE damage. Howling Fist is kind of a directional AoE. Elixir Field is circular around me. These two in the middle here I mentioned are very situational in that Haymaker can only be used after I dodge an attack, and when I'm in a party, because the big thing Haymaker does is it puts a slow effect on the enemy, but when I'm in a party, that effect is minimal, if not negligible. And I will generally not be dodging attacks while I'm in a party either. So, in a party, I'll almost never use Haymaker. Solo, it's quite important, actually. Mercy Stroke is when they're below 15% HP, I get an extra little attack. It's largely minimal. Perfect Balance is another ability that you will never see me use. It is a very good ability, but I am a bad monk. Perfect Balance effectively makes it so none of these abilities take, or I don't have to be in the correct form to use any of these abilities. Which means I can hit this and then just use Snap Punch like 3 times and have all 3 of my Greased Lightning stacks. So there's that. The 2 attacks over here are just to damage over times. I'll want to hit the enemy with it occasionally. If the enemy's too close to dead, it's not worth it. But I also don't want to use it if they still have the effect on them. Internal Release is just a buff for a brief amount of time. My crit rate is increased. Bloodbath is another one because after I use it for a brief amount of time, I do more damage, but also take more damage. Blood for Blood is an attack that I won't use nearly as often as I should. And that's it for the most part for everything outside of the regular rotation, which is these 9 abilities here. Of these 9 abilities, I have to start with one of these 3. After I use it, I have to use one of these 3. After I use one of them, I have to use one of these. You may have noticed after I do Form Shift, it shows that I'm in Raptor form here, and you can see that it's counting down. It will eventually wear off, meaning that I have to go back and I have to start all over again. But I can start just by punching with one of these. Now, of these 3, Boot Shine is my damage. If I just want to do damage, that's the one to use. Dragon Kick will put a debuff on the opponent, so I generally only want to use this when they don't have that debuff on them. Arm of the Destroyer is an AoE. Actually, let me show off some of these. Arm of the Destroyer. Then I have Elixir Field. And Howling Fist, which is directly in front of me. Oh, it's not going to let me do it without a target. So that's those. Similarly, over here, we have True Strike, which is strictly damage, much like Boot Shine was. Twin Snakes puts a buff on me, which, similar to Dragon Kick, I only want to use when I need to put the buff on me. One Ilm Punch I have only ever used by accident. One Ilm Punch will remove a buff from the opponent. However, it will not remove a buff from a boss, and buffs on regular mooks are negligible, so it's a useless ability. And then finally in the end we have Snap Punch, which is, again, raw damage. Demolish, which is, it puts a debuff on the opponent. Actually, it puts a dot on them, which is damage over time. Similar to Dragon Kick and Twin Snakes, I only want to use Demolish when they don't have that effect on them. And then Rock Breaker, which is another AoE. Take a brief moment here. We've got a striking dummy over here, and let's show how all these actually work together. So, if I use Boot Shine, say, I can then move into these, so I want to use True Strike and Snap Punch. So that's my regular damage combo. And in general, while I'm fighting, that's all I do, is just Boot Shine to True Strike to Snap Punch. Since Arm of the Destroyer and Rock Breaker are both AoEs, those aren't something that I will generally want to use regularly. I just know, hey, if there's a large group of enemies, maybe I'll give them a thing. Even then, they're both honestly really bad AoEs, and for the most part, they're still not worth it even against a large group of enemies. But we also have other abilities. Boot Shine, or Dragon Kick, for example, while I'm in Oppo form, which is the first form, which means I actually have to go through a full rotation to get it on, while I'm in that form, Dragon Kick will put a debuff on the opponent, which you can see up here. I can then follow up with Twin Snakes to put the buff on me, which you can see right there, and then end with Demolish to put that on them. So generally, that's the flow of battle. Once I'm in a position to be able to use Dragon Kick, which is... honestly, I could just use Form Shift from the get-go. Like, from where I am now, with nothing on me, Form Shift. And then I go Dragon Kick, Twin Snakes, Demolish. And then I can just do the regular damage combo, and I do this twice, because by then most things have worn off. And then I can go back to the buff-debuff combo again. And for the most part, this is the general flow of battle. This is effectively what I do. Where do all of these other abilities come in? Well, we have Fist of Fire, which is already on. While I'm fighting, if I'm not getting wrecked, I have no need for most of these. I've mentioned Form Shift a couple times. If I'm running low on TP, I could consider those, but I shouldn't, except under rare circumstance. And Tornado Kick I generally end the fight with. Now the Forbidden Chakra is, again, a nice buff, or not buff, but a nice bit of damage. But it also removes my chakra stacks, but now as the fight would go on, maybe I'm in a chance where I can hit that a couple times to get my 5 stacks back, and then once it's back up, I can do it again. Really just something to think about if you have some downtime, which Monk has, or at the very least, used to have no abilities that you could do during downtime. Now, other than that, we have a couple abilities over here. We have Steel Peak, which no real need to use. Striking Dummy's not going to do anything I need stunned. And Shoulder Tackle will close distance, so I can say run back here and go... and do that. Everything else here is... let's see, I've got Elixir Field and Howling Fist, which are good just if I want to... they're off global cooldown, so I can actually use them between regular attacks. So I could say hit Boot Shine, then Elixir Field, and then True Strike without losing time. And that's the important thing. Same thing with Howling Fist. As well as Internal Release and Blood for Blood, though Touch of Death and Fracture do take a global cooldown. So that's the gist of that. For the most part, it's I go through the regular rotation, I use these two, when they're up, hey, Elixir Field's up again. And for the most part, that's it. If it's against a slightly stronger enemy, I will make an attempt to use Touch of Death and Fracture. Now, when I use them is actually during my buff-debuff combo. I'll typically go Dragon Kick to Twin Snakes, then use Touch of Death, then Demolish, then Fracture. Now, the reason I do that is because you notice Greased Lightning here actually will wear off, and it's about to in 2, 1, and it's gone. So if I spend too much time going between rotations, I can lose my Greased Lightning, which I most certainly don't want to do. So I limit to only using Touch of Death, not Touch of Death and Fracture. And then after I use Demolish, at the end, it will refresh Greased Lightning, and then I use Fracture, which essentially puts it on the next Greased Lightning's cooldown. So, seeing that's 2 delays, I split it between 2 Greased Lightning cooldowns. That's also nice then to help if maybe I have to run away from the enemy for a second and get back on him. It gives me a couple extra seconds to maybe not lose Greased Lightning. This is also important because Dragon Kick and Twin Snakes both put buffs and debuffs on. So I want to use all my damage after the buffs and debuffs are on. So I go Dragon Kick and Twin Snakes, then Touch of Death and Demolish and Fracture, since those 3 are all just damage. Now, if I'm fighting something especially big and nasty that I know I'll have the time to do, I can also use Blood for Blood and Internal Release. These I will want to work in, since they're both buffs, I'll want to use them as soon as possible in my rotation. And I typically do them at the same time I do my buff-debuff combo with Dragon Kick, Twin Snakes, and Demolish. So what I do is I use Blood for Blood, then Dragon Kick, then Internal Release, then Twin Snakes. And then as you've seen, I use Twin Snakes, then Touch of Death, then Demolish, then Fracture. So that's all the buffs and debuffs up front, all the damage after that, with very few delays to help me not lose a potential Greased Lightning. Since I want to get as much damage as I can while I have all of these buffs and debuffs on, I'll also work in Howling Fist and Elixir Field into that mess, which I typically use on either side of Touch of Death. So that'll be like Twin Snakes, Howling Fist, Touch of Death, Elixir Field, and then Demolish. So how does this all work together? Okay, well, while I'm fighting, let's say I'm fighting a guy. You've learned about everything that I will do at this point, and maybe it's a bit much to grab all at once. But say I'm fighting a guy. Okay, I'll use Dragon Kick, then Twin Snakes, then Demolish, then I'll go 2 rounds before I do that one again. So if that was just a regular enemy, no big deal. Now let's say if it's a slightly stronger enemy, I'll of course want to get something a little bit harder in there. So I'll go that, and Twin Snakes, Touch of Death, Demolish, Fracture, and then right back to my damage combo again. Now if it's something especially big and nasty, I'm going to want to get in as much as I can, which means not only using Blood for Blood and Internal Release, but also Howling Fist and Elixir Field, and you know what, I actually kind of want to use the Forbidden Chakra too, because if I've got it up, I'll want to use it. Now, Forbidden Chakra is going to be the biggest hit that I have. So I'll typically use Forbidden Chakra at the end of everything, after even Demolish. But I can weave it in, so I'll go Demolish, then that, then Fracture. So just get everything nice and peeled out as soon as possible. But I do it after Demolish because maybe I don't have 3 stacks of Greased Lightning. So if I'm going to put anything after I get another stack of Greased Lightning on, it's Forbidden Chakra. I got my TP back, so let's see how this looks in the biggest, baddest thing that I can bring myself to do. Actually, you know what? Let's back off for just a second. Get some TP back, let all my stuff wear off, Greased Lightning. Because typically, that combo is something I'll only use at the very beginning of an entire fight. Not very often do all my cooldowns work together enough to be able to do that in the midst of a fight. So that's Form Shift 3 times, so I can start on Snap Punch. And I run up and go boom, 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 boom. And then I should be back to my regular DPS combo, and that's everything that I had. But at the end of that, I should have 3 stacks of Greased Lightning, which means Tornado Kick. That is... Granted, after I use Tornado Kick at the end, I lose my Greased Lightning stacks, but in the shortest amount of time possible, that is the most damage I can do. And you can see I still didn't use the vast majority of the abilities sitting down here. But that's Monk. That's how I play Monk. Sadly, I have to run away from this thing to get it to untarget me. That's Monk. That's how I play Monk. I don't entirely think I'm perfect at playing Monk. I don't even think I'm a good Monk. I know I have flaws, and I don't know how much attempt I'm going to make to fix them. But that has been Final Fantasy XIV. This is where I am in the game, and hopefully I'll be able to bring some content to you guys soon. Hopefully everything that I did here may have taught you a little bit about what I do, and what you see me do in the videos, and hopefully it's made you a little less intimidated by by the number of buttons there, if by chance you felt intimidated by them, which I'm sure not everybody was. Oh well. Until next time, everyone.